March 19th, 1959. Chicago Civic Opera House. 15,000 people waited for Louis Armstrong to take the stage. Behind the curtain, Louis stared at the trumpet in his hands. But he couldn't hold it. His hands were shaking. Not from excitement, from pain. Deep, devastating, breathtaking pain. Because 3 hours earlier, Louis had received a phone call. The caller was his sister Beatrice, and the words she spoke had stopped Louis's world. "Louis, Lucy's gone. Our sister is gone." Louis had dropped the phone. Everyone around him had rushed over. "Mr. Armstrong, are you okay?" Louis couldn't answer, because when Lucy left, a part of Louis left with her. Mama Lucy, his little sister, Louis's only refuge in life, the person he had promised to protect. And now she was gone. Louis had to go on stage. 15,000 tickets had been sold. Canceling was impossible. But how could he play? How could he smile? How could he be that happy Louis Armstrong? Because Louis Armstrong's smile was a mask, and tonight that mask was going to shatter for the first time. He walked onto the stage. The spotlight hit him. Applause rose, but what Louis saw wasn't the audience. What he saw was 48 years ago. New Orleans, little Lucy, and a promise Louis had made to her, a promise he couldn't keep. But the story begins earlier, much earlier. To understand the depth of what Louis lost on March 19th, 1959, you need to understand what Lucy meant to him. And to understand that, we need to go back. Not just weeks, but decades. If this story about love, loss, and the unbreakable bonds of family moves you, please consider subscribing to our channel. We tell the stories that reveal the humanity behind the legends, the hearts behind the heroes. 3 weeks before that devastating phone call, Louis Armstrong was in New York recording what would become one of his most successful albums. It was late February 1959, and Louis was at the peak of his career. At 57 years old, he was a global icon, beloved by millions, recognized everywhere he went. But despite all his fame, despite all his success, Louis made time every single week to do one thing: call Lucy. Every Sunday evening, no matter where he was in the world, Louis would find a phone and call his sister in New Orleans. These calls lasted hours. They would talk about everything and nothing. Lucy would tell Louis about her children, her neighbors, her garden. Louis would tell Lucy about his travels, his concerts, his life on the road. But more than the words, it was the connection, the reminder that despite everything Louis had become, he was still Lucy's big brother, the boy from the battlefield neighborhood who had promised to always take care of her. The information in this video is compiled from documented interviews, archival news, books, and historical reports. For narrative purposes, some parts are dramatized and may not represent 100% factual accuracy. We also use AI-assisted visuals and AI narration for cinematic reconstruction. The use of AI does not mean the story is fake. It is a storytelling tool. Our goal is to recreate the spirit of that era as faithfully as possible. Enjoy watching. On the last Sunday of February 1959, Louis called Lucy as usual, but this time something was different. Lucy's voice sounded tired. "Louis, I'm fine," she insisted when he asked. "Just a little under the weather, nothing to worry about." But Louis worried. He had been worrying about Lucy for 48 years. Ever since he was 10 years old and she was 3, when their father abandoned the family and their mother had to work brutal hours just to keep them fed. Louis remembered those days with painful clarity. Coming home to find little Lucy crying because she was hungry, searching through the house for any scrap of food, feeling helpless, powerless, unable to protect his baby sister from the harsh reality of poverty. That helplessness had driven Louis his entire life. Every note he played, every stage he conquered, every dollar he earned, it was all so he could keep the promise he made to 3-year-old Lucy. "You'll never be hungry again. I'll take care of you. Always." And Louis had kept that promise. When he started making money in the 1920s, the first thing he did was send money to Lucy. When Lucy got married in 1932, Louis paid for the entire wedding. When Lucy's husband struggled to find work during the Depression, Louis bought them a house. When Lucy's children needed to go to school, Louis paid their tuition. For nearly 50 years, Louis had been Lucy's protector, provider, and guardian angel, but that last phone call in February haunted Louis. Something in Lucy's voice had been off, a weakness he had never heard before. Louis told his wife Lucille about his concern. "Maybe I should go visit her, make sure she's really okay." Lucille, always practical, said, "Louis, you have concerts scheduled. You can't just leave." Louis nodded, but the worry didn't leave. He called Lucy again midweek, something he rarely did. Lucy sounded better, stronger. "Louis, stop fussing. I told you I'm fine. You worry too much." Louis laughed, but it was forced. "That's my job, Lucy, worrying about you." Lucy's response would echo in Louis's mind for the rest of his life. "Louis, you've worried about me long enough. You've taken care of me my whole life. It's okay to rest now." At the time, Louis thought she was just telling him to relax. Only later would he understand she was saying goodbye. Let me ask you something. Have you ever lost someone you loved and wished you could have one more conversation with them? One more chance to say what you needed to say. Leave a comment and share your thoughts. To truly understand the bond between Louis and Lucy, we need to go even further back, to 1901, when Louis was born in the poorest, most dangerous section of New Orleans. The neighborhood was so violent it was literally called the battlefield. Louis's father, Louis Armstrong, was a turpentine worker who abandoned the family when Louis was just an infant. His mother, Mary Ann, worked as a domestic servant, cleaning houses for white families, working from dawn to late night for barely enough money to survive. In 1904, Mary Ann gave birth to Lucy. Louis was 3 years old, but even at that age, he understood that his baby sister was something precious, something that needed protection. As they grew up in the battlefield, Louis became Lucy's shield. When neighborhood kids tried to bully her, Louis stepped in. When there wasn't enough food, Louis made sure Lucy ate first. When it was cold and they only had one blanket, Louis gave it to Lucy. This wasn't duty. This was love. Pure, unconditional, sacrificial love. Lucy was Louis's first responsibility, his first purpose. Before he ever picked up a trumpet, before he ever dreamed of being a musician, Louis's identity was defined by one simple fact. He was Lucy's big brother. In 1913, when Louis was arrested for firing a gun on New Year's Eve and sent to the colored waifs' home for boys, his biggest fear wasn't punishment. It was being separated from Lucy. Who would protect her while he was gone? Who would make sure she was safe? At the waif's home, Louis learned to play the cornet. Music became his escape, his salvation, his future. But even as he discovered his talent, even as he began to dream of a life beyond the battlefield, one thought remained constant. When I get out, I'm going to take care of Lucy. I'm going to make sure she never suffers like Mama did. This promise drove everything Louis did. When he left the waif's home and started playing professionally, he didn't spend his earnings on himself. He gave most of it to his mother to help care for Lucy. When he joined King Oliver's Creole Jazz Band in Chicago in 1922 and started making real money, he immediately arranged for Lucy to have a better living situation. Louis's success wasn't just about personal achievement. It was about fulfilling a promise to a 3-year-old girl who had depended on him when they had nothing. By the 1950s, Louis Armstrong was one of the most famous musicians in the world. He had played for kings, presidents, and millions of fans across the globe. But every accomplishment, every accolade, every triumph, Louis measured by one standard. Did this make Lucy's life better? Did this keep my promise? When Louis bought his house in Corona, Queens in 1943, one of the first things he did was invite Lucy to visit. He showed her every room, proud as a child, showing off a good report card. "See, Lucy, I told you we wouldn't be poor forever." Lucy had cried tears of joy, not because of the house, but because her brother had remembered. After 40 years, he still remembered the hungry little girl in New Orleans, and he had kept his word. Now, back to March 19th. 1959. The phone call that shattered Louis's world. Louis was in Chicago preparing for his evening concert. The phone in his hotel room rang. Louis answered casually, expecting his manager or a band member. Instead, he heard Beatrice's voice. Beatrice was his older sister, the practical one, the strong one. But her voice was breaking. "Louis, you need to sit down." Louis's heart immediately started racing. "What happened? Is it Mama Lucy?" There was a pause that felt like an eternity. Then Beatrice said 3 words that destroyed Louis. "She's in hospital. Louis, it's her heart. The doctors say there's nothing they can do." Louis couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what he was hearing. "What? No! No, I just talked to her. She said she was fine. She promised me she was fine." Beatrice was crying now. "She didn't want to worry you, Louis. She's been sick for weeks. But she didn't tell you because she knew you'd cancel your tour. She didn't want you to lose money because of her." That revelation cut Louis deeper than anything. Lucy, even dying, had been protecting him. Just as he had spent his life protecting her, she had spent her last weeks protecting him. "I'm coming," Louis said. "Tell her I'm coming. Tell her to wait for me." "Please, Beatrice, tell her to wait." Beatrice's voice was barely a whisper. "Louis, I don't know if there's time. She's very weak." Louis dropped the phone and ran out of his hotel room. He found his road manager, Joe Glazer. "Joe, I need to get to New Orleans right now. Lucy's dying." Joe immediately understood. He knew how much Lucy meant to Louis. "I'll arrange a flight. But Louis, your concert tonight." Louis turned to him with an expression Joe had never seen before, raw, desperate grief. "Cancel it. Cancel everything. I have to get to Lucy." But here's where the tragedy deepens. It was 1959. Air travel wasn't as easy or fast as it is today. The earliest flight from Chicago to New Orleans wasn't until the next morning. Louis had to wait, had to spend an entire night knowing his sister was dying and he couldn't get to her. That night, Louis didn't sleep. He sat in his hotel room, holding his trumpet, unable to play a single note. Because every note reminded him of Lucy. Every memory of his career was tied to her. He remembered 1925 when he made his first recording with the Hot Five. He had called Lucy immediately after. "Lucy, I recorded a song today. Real professional recording. Maybe you'll hear it on the radio someday." Lucy had been so excited. "My brother on the radio! Louis, you're going to be famous!" Louis had laughed. "I don't care about famous, Lucy. I just want to make enough money so you never have to worry." He remembered 1932 when he performed in Europe for the first time. He had sent Lucy a postcard from London. "Lucy, I'm in England. Can you believe it? A boy from the battlefield playing for people in England. I wish you could see this." Lucy had kept that postcard for the rest of her life. He remembered 1956 when his recording of Mac the Knife became a huge hit. He had visited Lucy in New Orleans and brought her a gold record. "This is for you, Lucy. Every note I played on this. I was thinking about that promise I made when we were kids. I told you I'd take care of you. This gold record, this is proof I kept my word." Lucy had hung that gold record in her living room. It was the first thing visitors saw when they entered her house. The next morning, March 19th, Louis boarded the first flight to New Orleans, and the flight felt endless. Every minute was torture. Louis kept thinking, "Please let me get there in time. Please let me say goodbye. Please let me tell her one more time how much she means to me." When the plane finally landed, Louis ran through the airport. A car was waiting to take him to the hospital. The drive through New Orleans streets Louis had grown up on, felt surreal. Everything looked the same, but nothing would ever be the same again. Louis arrived at the hospital. Beatrice was waiting in the lobby. The expression on her face told Louis everything. "Louis, I'm so sorry. She passed away 2 hours ago." Louis's knees buckled. Joe caught him before he fell. No, she was supposed to wait. I told her to wait for me." Beatrice took Louis's hand. "Louis, she did wait. She held on as long as she could, but Louis, she was in so much pain. When she finally let go, she looked peaceful, like she was ready." Louis couldn't accept it. "I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't get to tell her." His voice broke. "I didn't get to tell her I love her." Beatrice's next words were both a comfort and a knife. "Louis, she knew. She always knew. The last thing she said before she passed was your name. She said, 'Tell Louis I'm proud of him. Tell him he kept his promise. Tell him I love him.'" Louis collapsed into a chair and wept. For the first time in his adult life, Louis Armstrong, the man who smiled for millions, the entertainer who brought joy to the world, broke down completely. The hospital staff gave him space. Joe and Beatrice sat with him, silent, letting him grieve. Hours passed. Finally, Louis spoke. "I want to see her." Beatrice hesitated. "Louis, are you sure?" Louis nodded. "I need to see her. I need to say goodbye." They took Louis to the room where Lucy's body lay. Louis walked in slowly, as if moving through water. There she was. Lucy. Mama Lucy. She looked peaceful, just as Beatrice had said. Louis sat beside her, took her hand, and for the next hour Louis talked to his sister. He told her everything he wished he had said on that last phone call. He reminded her of their childhood, of the promises he had made, of all the moments they had shared. He thanked her for being the reason he never gave up, the reason he kept fighting, the reason every success mattered. And he apologized. "I'm sorry I wasn't here, Lucy. I'm sorry you died alone. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from this." But even as he said it, Louis knew something Lucy had known all along. He had protected her. For 48 years, he had kept his promise. Lucy had never been hungry, never been cold, never been abandoned. She had lived a good life, a comfortable life, a loved life, because of Louis, because of the scared 10-year-old boy who had promised his 3-year-old sister that everything would be okay. And it had been, until it wasn't. The funeral was held 3 days later. Louis insisted on paying for everything. The service was at a small church in New Orleans, the same church where Lucy had been baptized as a child. Hundreds of people attended. Lucy had been beloved in her community, known for her kindness, her generosity, her gentle spirit. But everyone there knew that the most devastated person in that church was Louis. He sat in the front row, Lucille beside him, holding his hand. Throughout the service, people expected Louis to speak, to share memories, maybe even to play his trumpet in tribute. But Louis couldn't. Every time he tried to stand, his legs wouldn't support him. His voice was gone. His music was gone, because it had all been buried with Lucy. After the funeral, after Lucy was laid to rest in a cemetery overlooking the Mississippi River, Louis returned to work. He had to. Contracts had been signed, concerts had been scheduled, people were depending on him. But something fundamental had changed in Louis Armstrong. Those who knew him well noticed it immediately. His smile, which had always been genuine despite the pain he carried, now looked forced. His laugh, which had been infectious and joyful, now sounded hollow. And his music, his beautiful, soul-stirring music, had taken on a different quality. There was a sadness in it now, a melancholy that hadn't been there before. Louis recorded "What a Wonderful World" in 1967, 8 years after Lucy's death. When people hear that song, they hear Louis's famous gravelly voice singing about trees of green and skies of blue. But those who knew Louis's story heard something else. They heard a man singing about a world he wished existed, a world where little sisters didn't die, where promises could always be kept, where love was enough to conquer death. Louis Armstrong lived for 12 more years after Lucy passed away. He continued to perform, to record, to bring joy to millions. But close friends and family knew that a part of Louis had died with Lucy. His wife, Lucille, once said in an interview, "After Lucy passed, Louis was never quite the same. He still loved music, still loved performing. But there was a sadness in him that never left. Sometimes I'd find him late at night, just sitting with his trumpet, not playing, just holding it. And I knew he was thinking about Lucy, about the promise he made, about the little girl he couldn't save." On July 6, 1971, Louis Armstrong passed away at his home in Corona, Queens. He was 69 years old. Among his personal effects, found in a drawer beside his bed, was a small photograph. The photograph showed 2 children, a boy about 10 years old and a little girl about 3. They were standing in front of a wooden house in New Orleans, both smiling despite their tattered clothes. On the back of the photograph, in Louis's handwriting, were 5 words. "I kept my promise, Lucy." At Louis's funeral, his sister Beatrice spoke. She was the only surviving member of Louis's immediate family. Through tears, she told the assembled mourners something that wasn't widely known. Louis never got over Lucy's death. He carried that grief with him every day for 12 years. But he also carried something else. Pride. Pride that he had been her brother. Pride that he had kept his word to her. Pride that their story, which started in the poorest, most dangerous neighborhood in New Orleans, had ended with dignity, with love, with promises fulfilled. Beatrice revealed one final detail that moved everyone to tears. In his will, Louis had left instructions that when he died, he was to be buried with one item: Lucy's photograph. He wanted to be reunited with her, Beatrice explained. He wanted her to know that even in death, he was still her big brother, still watching over her, still keeping his promise. Today, when people visit the Louis Armstrong House Museum in Corona, Queens, they see his trumpets, his records, his awards. But if you look carefully in one of the rooms, you'll find a small display dedicated to Lucy. There's a photograph of her, the gold record Louis gave her in 1956, and a handwritten note from Louis. The note reads, "To Mama Lucy, you were my first audience, my first fan, my first reason to succeed. Everything I accomplished for you. I love you, always have, always will. Your brother, Louis." March 19th, 1959 wasn't just the day Louis Armstrong lost his sister. It was the day he lost his purpose, his reason, his heart. For 48 years, every note Louis played had been for Lucy. Every smile had been to make her proud. Every success had been to keep a promise made by a scared 10-year-old boy to his hungry 3-year-old sister. And when Lucy died, that purpose died with her. Louis continued to live, continued to perform, continued to be Louis Armstrong, but he was never whole again. Because the most important audience member of his entire career, the one person whose approval mattered more than all the millions of fans combined, was gone. The day Louis Armstrong buried his sister Lucy, he buried his heart with her. And though his music continued to bring joy to the world, those who truly knew Louis understood that the joy was tinged with grief. Grief for a little girl in New Orleans who never got to be hungry again. Grief for a promise kept at a cost too high to bear. Grief for a love that death could end, but never diminish. If this story reminded you of the people in your life who matter most, who shaped you, who you would do anything for, please share this video. Let others know that behind every great achievement is often a simple promise made to someone we love. Louis Armstrong didn't become a legend to be famous. He became a legend to keep a promise to his sister. And that's the most beautiful kind of success there is.